This evening we're going to look at Blessed Mother Teresa, so let's gather in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father in heaven, we ask you to be with us this evening as we open our minds and our hearts to Blessed Mother Teresa. We ask you to help us ponder as she pondered, reflect as she reflected, and be willing to care for the poorest of the poor at all times. And we pray, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Blessed Mother Teresa is one of these very, very interesting people because of her history and also the fact that she was a really, really tiny, short little nun who wielded a lot of power. She was one of these people that when you had an appointment with her, or when somebody made an appointment with you for her, you knew you were about to be fleeced. Because usually, Iacocca has the best story of all, where it's sort of like, and I got this phone call saying, Mother Teresa would like to meet with you. And how do you say no to Mother Teresa? He says, but at the same time, I knew that that woman was not going to leave my office without a very large check. That was Blessed Mother Teresa. Blessed Mother Teresa began her life on the 26th of August in 1910. Her parents, both her mother and father, were of Albanian descent, and she was born in Skopje, Macedonia. And at that time, it was still part of the Ottoman Empire. Got to remember, this is prior to the First World War. She had a very, normal childhood and that kind of thing. But she was always very, very close to the church. She also had, at the age of 12, she was convinced that she was called to the religious life. She knew that this is where she was going to go. And she, at the age of 12, she was praying in front of the Black Madonna, and where she had gone on pilgrimage, and she had this vision, this awareness that she was called to religious life. She's 12 years old. She doesn't enter religious life until she's 18, and at that time that's kind of not normal, because usually she would have gone in like at 15 or 16. But she joined at the age of 18. And she joined the Sisters of Loreto and went to their abbey in Ireland, of all places. So you've got this person, this Albanian from Macedonia, traveling all the way to Ireland to become a sister. Talk about a massive cultural shock. But the Sisters of Loreto have, for years and years and years, had outreach to India, Macedonia, Albania, that part of the world. But they would always take the girls back to Ireland to train them. And sadly, this is part of it, is take them away from the influence of their family and introduce them to a new family, which is the religious order. Any of you that may have talked to sisters who went in many years ago to religious life, they would tell you they might have got to talk to their parents once a month. They might have got home to see their family once a year. And the whole idea was to, for lack of better terminology, turn your back on that family to embrace this new family that you are being given or that you have desire to enter into. Whether it was good or bad, that is not up to us to decide. That's what was done, and for many of them, it worked wonderfully. For some of them, it was a disaster. For Mother Teresa, it was an opening into a new way of life. She arrived back, and this is the funny part. She goes to Ireland in 1928. She's back to India in 1929. Either she was a really quick study, right, or they just had to get her out of Ireland. And we're not quite sure which one. She went there. She had to learn English. 1 year, full immersion in English in Ireland. You know, we're very lucky that the woman was able to speak English at all. She works with the sisters in India, and she does her novitiate in Darjeeling. And it's sort of in the Himalayan mountains. There she worked in the school. The school was very, very close to the convent. This was going to be her life. She was going to be a teacher. She took her religious vows in 1931, and at that time she chose the name after Teresa of Lisieux, the patron saint of missionaries. But because one of the nuns in the convent had already chosen the name Teresa from Teresa of Lisieux, and Blessed Mother Teresa, her real name is Agnes. She chose Teresa, and she changed the spelling of it to the Spanish form of Teresa, no H included. She took her solemn vows in 1937 while serving as a teacher still in the Loreto convent. And the school was in eastern part of Calcutta. She served there for almost 20 years, and in 1944 she was made the headmistress. So you're looking at somebody who is moving up the scales in religious life quite quickly. She's a very bright woman. She's been educated. She's a teacher. She's working with these people. And she enjoyed teaching very, very much. And she was always considered an exceptional teacher. But she's teaching in the eastern side of Calcutta, which is the poorest of the poor, and she is being overwhelmed by the poverty. We have to remember India at this time is very much ruled by the caste system. And the castes don't mix. You're either upper class, middle, or nothing. And what she sees, because she's teaching in a school that is mostly the rich caste. And there's the impoverished. And there's the poor. And they're dying on the street, and nobody seems to care. She went on a mission, pilgrimage. And on the pilgrimage in 1946, she has what she referred to as a calling within her calling. She knew she was called to a religious life, but within her religious life, there is the calling. Am I a nurse? Am I a teacher? What is it that God is desiring of me? And her experience of this calling within a calling was to reach out to the poor. The challenge with that is you're in a teaching order. So now what do? And she needed permission to leave the convent, to leave the order, to work with the poor. And she became a missionary to the poor in 1948. In 1948, she replaced her traditional Sisters of Loreto garb for the blue and white sari that the Sisters of Charity now have as their trademark. The whole idea of the white cotton sari was to be in touch with the people. The interesting thing about Mother Teresa is she refers to herself as by birth an Albanian, but by choice an Indian. She gave up her Albanian citizenship and took out citizenship in India. She had to be one with the people. She desired to be one with the poor of the poor. She started working with the poor, and the problem with working with the poor is, how do you take care of them? So once again, she had to go to school. And she spent a year working in one of the hospitals in Calcutta, learning the basic medical necessities for taking care of the poor and the dying. 1 year. to be able to do this outreach. She ventures out into the slums, and she started a school for the poor of the children. She's a teacher. She's tending to the needs of those children. Problem is, how do you teach a child that's starving? It's very difficult to teach somebody whose stomach is growling constantly. Because of her efforts, and this was one of the things about Mother Teresa. I was in a room with Mother Teresa, and Mother Teresa was probably 30 feet away from me, and you could feel a certain level of magnetism. There was something about her that people were drawn to. And so there she is, and she's working with the poor, and she's trying to teach these young people, and she's trying to work with these people who are destitute and starving and all this kind of thing. And guess what? Other young women were drawn to it. You had young women who gave up everything to come and follow this short, tiny, but determined woman to take care of the poor and the impoverished. If you ever met her, it was charism, it was the power of Christ, it was a whole lot of things all at once. The government of India recognized her work almost immediately because she was seeming to have some kind of effect in the slums. And a problem with India is it's got huge slums, and it has a lot of impoverished, it has a lot of poor, and with that caste system in place, you are kept in the poor of the poor. In India, the likelihood of a farmer's son becoming anything other than a farmer's son was impossible. If I had grown up in India, becoming a priest with my father being a farmer would never happen. You don't rise above your status. You have this Mother Teresa who's going out there, and the thing is, it's like she's highly respected, she's a teacher, she's educated, and she is working as a servant of the poor. For many people, that's very appealing. For many people, it's also very challenging. The government recognized this, and all of a sudden her appeal grew. And more people wanted to follow her. In 1950, so we're moving really, really quickly, 48, missionary to the poor. 1950, she gets permission from the Vatican to start a diocesan congregation that would become the Missionaries of Charity. So she doesn't even start off as a worldwide order, she starts off as a diocesan order and congregation. And so what is happening is this appeal. The work that she's doing is appealing to people, and people want to join her. So we're talking 1950. Its mission, this congregation's mission, its mission was to care for, in Mother Teresa's words, the hungry, the naked, the homeless, the crippled, the blind, the lepers, all those people who feel unwanted, unloved, uncared for throughout society, people that have become a burden to the society and are shunned by everyone. It started off with 13 members, and by 1997 had grown to over 4,000 members. Amazing. It has AIDS hospices, charity centers worldwide. It cares for refugees, the blind, the disabled, the aged, the alcoholics, the poor, the homeless, victims of flood, epidemics, and famine. They run AIDS houses in California. And this is where the story of Lee Iacocca comes in, because Lee Iacocca, she went to Lee Iacocca to get the money to build the houses in California. And so they built the houses in California, and Lee Iacocca paid for the houses in California. I think it was Chrysler, but I don't know because that part of the story gets a little shady. But what's interesting about it is they had these houses in California for the AIDS patients. And the Sisters of Charity would look after the AIDS patients in these houses. And when they first went in there, when they first walked into the houses, the very, very first thing that Mother Teresa had them do was rip out all the carpets and put in linoleum. Anybody want to guess why? Easier to clean, and you don't have to worry about bacteria and all the stuff that comes with carpeting. And of course, this is the part I like. Guess who she gave the bill to? Here you go. You can pay for this. Go ahead. It'll be fine. You know. The reality is, it's like somebody should have known better. She was very, very determined. So you're looking at 13 to 4,000 in less than 50 years. Absolutely amazing. In 1952, Mother Teresa opened the first house for the dying in a space made available by the city of Calcutta. She then opened a house for those suffering from Hansen's disease, which is leprosy, which is a major issue also in India. These houses for the dying, the houses for the lepers, serve two different kinds of purposes. The lepers, as in the Old Testament, as in the New Testament, were shunned because there's still the mindset that the one, your leprosy is because you were a sinner, and two, we might catch it. So you have to get away, get away, get away. Well, yes, if you hang out around people with leprosy long enough, you may wind up getting it. There's no guarantee, but it has a tendency to happen. But you have to be in contact with them constantly. Mother Teresa opened these houses. The dying was another problem. One of my favorite stories of Mother Teresa is how she and one of the young sisters were walking home one evening after having been out in the streets begging, because that's what they did. They begged for money and for food to care for the dying. And on their way home, they found this person laying in the gutter. And so they picked the person up and they took the person to the house of the dying. It's very, very late in the evening when they got back to the house. Mother Teresa sends the young sister off to her bed and proceeds to start cleaning up the person. The way Mother Teresa relates this in her book is that as she washed the body of the person, she began to see Christ in the person. And as she washed the face of this woman, Christ shone through her. And she had this incredible moment with Jesus Christ in this dying person. And in the story, as she relates it, she had never had that experience in front of the Blessed Sacrament like she had with the person who was about to die. Incredibly profound. Our challenge as Christians is, can we see Christ in one another? Do we recognize Christ in the other? In the story, Mother Teresa is recognizing Christ in this impoverished, poor, street person who is very, very close to death. Mother Teresa got into trouble a number of times for talking about the fact, the dryness of her spiritual life, and how she struggled with the dryness of her spiritual life, and that there were many, many years, and she went for years and years and years having no connectedness to Christ. But her connectedness to Mary never left her. Mother Teresa is one of the people that we look at and we refer to when we talk about consecrating our lives to Christ through Mary. Because it was Mary who kept her on the straight and narrow. It was Mary who kept her focused on Jesus Christ. It was Mary who reminded her that this is the work that you are called to do. And for Mother Teresa, it was in the words of, I thirst. Mother Teresa thirsted for these people. She desired to care for these people. She felt their thirst and their need. And in her own life, she thirsted for Christ. But the wellspring was Mary that filled her thirst. It's a really, really interesting challenge because she has been a number of times challenged, questions, and even the case of her sainthood and her being raised to the level of blessed has this criticism because she talked about all of these years where she felt no connection to Christ. Well, how can you be a saint if you don't feel connected to Christ? How can you be a holy person if you've had all of these years of disconnect with Christ? Except that in all of those years, she was never disconnected from our Blessed Mother. For some Catholics, that explains it all. But for some people, well, yes, but Jesus, it's all about Jesus, and if you don't feel connected to Jesus, there must be something wrong with you. Well, John of the Cross experienced, Teresa of Avila experienced it. Many of the great saints have experienced the dryness, the desert, the thirst. And what keeps us on the straight and narrow? Usually our relationship with the Blessed Mother. Pulls us back, realigns us. When you look at Mother Teresa and what she did, she had to get her strength from somewhere. She had to get that lifting up. She had to get that desire and that charism. Like why else would anybody want to join? How do you go from 13 to 4,000 in less than 50 years if God is not at work in this? And if the Holy Spirit is not at work in this, then God's not at work at this, and God was at work. All of the great work that she did, she traveled everywhere, and she opened houses everywhere. And that charism people fed off of. You still can join Mother Teresa's order without actually having to become a sister, a brother, or a priest. You can sign up and work with them as a lay apostolate. You can sign up and work with them as a lay volunteer. All you have to do is make a commitment for a period of time. The interesting thing that she did is she would get these young people who would volunteer and come and work with the sisters for 2 years, for 3 years, whatever. And guess what? Tons of them stay, right? Not all of them make a commitment for life. Mother Teresa is one of the few orders where it's like, you know what, you can actually stretch before you make your final vows, right? I'm not sure. Okay, it's all right, not a problem. Temporary vows are just fine. Mother Superior, I think I'm called to this other life. Wonderful. Thank you for your 20 years of commitment. Thank you for your 5 years of commitment. Thank you for whatever you've committed and given to the order. We very, very much appreciate it. And the person goes off into the real world, and they go to work, and guess where their money goes? Because you know what? You could take the person from that congregation, but you can't take the congregation out of that person once they have made that commitment to them. Once you're part of that Mother Teresa group, once you've been attached to the sisters, once the missionaries of charity get their hooks in you, you're done. Because there is something about it. There is no way that you can go back to the real world and live in the real world without walking down the street and recognizing the impoverished. There's no way you can walk down the street and not notice the poor. And immediately, that training that you received kicks into place, and you need to do something about it. And many of these people who were part of it and have helped out over the years are the movers and shakers in the order. Because they're the fundraisers. Because the biggest issue that any religious order has is how do you serve these people with nothing? Mother Teresa was an incredible fundraiser. She could get money out of a rock. But the challenge is not everybody knows how to do that. And some of the people who have been with her continue to do that kind of work for them. Nobody has kind of stepped up to the level that Mother Teresa did. But then again, there will never be another Mother Teresa. In 1982, at the height of the siege of Beirut, Mother Teresa rescued 37 children trapped in the frontline hospital by brokering a temporary ceasefire between the Israeli army and the Palestinian guerrillas. Accompanied by Red Cross workers, she traveled through the war zone to the devastated hospital to evacuate the young patients. Like, anybody want to volunteer to do that? Like, hello, it's a war zone. They're fighting with each other. And you have these 37 patients in there, children who are trapped in the midst of all of this. And it's like, okay, you people are going to stop firing, and you people are going to stop firing, and we're going to go through and get those children, and you will not fire at each other until we are safe. Who does that? You know? And the thing is, it's like, you know, we got a room in the psychiatric ward for people like that. But this is the kind of stuff that Mother Teresa did. And the amazing part about it is the Israeli army stopped fighting and the Palestinians stopped, and they all just sort of like, it's Mother Teresa, nobody's doing anything. Like, you know, she's that scary. We're going to stop fighting. Like, it would be kind of interesting to see if she had taken it a step farther and made them broker a deal for peace. You know, she's another one of the stories is in 1991, Mother Teresa returned to the first time to her homeland and opened the Missionary Charity Brothers home in Tara, Albania. She would travel all around the place to do things. And part of it is, I can't ask any of my brothers or the sisters to do anything that I myself am not willing to do. If the floor needs to be cleaned, I will clean the floor. If the person needs to be washed, I will wash the filth off of them. She never did anything that didn't have meaning. If you're one of the volunteers, if you're one of the sisters, if you're one of the brothers, and the superior is out there scrubbing the urine off the floor, then what do? Excuse me, Mother Superior, here, let me take care of that. No, this is my duty. The next time you see something that needs to be done, what do? You get in there and you do it. And that whole leading by example, where she would go to places and she would be the first in there, and she would be the first to do this, and she would be the first to do that. These are the kinds of things that made the difference and that challenged people to do the same. Now, having said all of that, I am never going to say that Mother Teresa was perfect. Mother Teresa was hot-tempered, stubborn. She could be highly obnoxious, right? And you really didn't want to cross that little woman. She had a fiery temper. She could get very angry. But that whole fire was part of the charism that made her who she was. She fought for the poor. She fought for the lepers. She fought for the homeless. She fought for the dying. She did all of these things. Were all of her choices along the way correct? And no, they weren't. She's been accused of taking money from people who you should never have taken money from. Okay? On the other hand, somebody walks up to you and says, here's $5,000 to feed the hungry. Do you check their credentials? In our day and age, maybe, you know. But the thing is like when somebody walked up to Mother Teresa and said, here's $5,000, feed the hungry, she took the $5,000, fed the hungry. She didn't ask for their mother's note. There are times when she possibly knew that the money that she was receiving was not necessarily clean money. But I don't know her mind, and I don't know what she knows and what she didn't know. But this is one of the things she's been accused of. And this is one of the things where it's like it's really, really easy to accuse the person after they're dead. The other side of it is okay, so what do we look at? We look at the bounty of the good works. What did she do with what she had? The other side of it is okay, she'll answer to God. I'm not going to be there. You're not going to be there. She'll be in the room with Jesus. It'll all be fine. They'll figure it out. But what I look at is all the good works that she did and all the people that she brought a transformation into their lives. There is another thing that she is challenged with is because of her lack of medical training. And there are many doctors that have said, well, in these houses for dying, she should be doing this, and she should be doing that, and she should be doing this, and they should be giving these people these drugs, and we should be giving those people those drugs. And Mother Teresa's going, and who's going to pay for the drugs? They're houses of dying in the slums and the poorest of the poor, and you do what you can do. It's wonderful to come in there and say, these people should be receiving these drugs. Fine. Give me the drugs. We'll be happy to give them to them. Where are you going to get the money for the drugs? You do the best you can with the with the cards that you've been dealt. That was Mother Teresa's way of dealing with it. There will never be enough money to take care of all the dying in those third world countries. There will be never enough money to take care of the poor and the impoverished in India. We would have to go through a severe rebalancing throughout the world of monies to be able to do that. And I can guarantee you that 1% of people who has most of the money in this world is not going to give up their money so the poor people in Calcutta can have a good life. They might give a little bit of it, but they're not going to give the whole bunch. This is the challenge that Mother Teresa faced. You can only do what you can with what you have, and you do the best you can with what you have. When Mother Teresa lay in repose in St. Thomas in Calcutta, she was laid out for a week. Thousands of people came through. Thousands of people, from the rich to the poor, from the powerful, from the elite, came to pay their respects for this rather tiny little woman who shook a lot of people up. When they look at that whole sense of what she did with what she had, the sisters, her final request was, wrap me in a sheet, put me in the ground. We all know what happened. The Indian government insisted on a state funeral, a televised, large-scale state funeral. They wanted this to be in gratitude for everything that she had done and for all the poor religious in India. Her death was mourned both in the secular world and in the spiritual world. The religious communities throughout the world recognized that we had lost something very powerful. What I find very, very interesting is, anybody know when she had her first heart attack? In 1983, while visiting John Paul II, she had her first heart attack. I met John Paul II. It's an amazing experience, but I didn't have a heart attack. When I read that the first time, I'm going like, holy smokes, what an influence. Her second heart attack was in 1989. She had a pacemaker. She was told to slow down. Well, that didn't work very well. She was continuing to have heart problems from 1991 on until her death in 97. As much as they told her to slow down, to stop, to step back, she wouldn't do it. As long as I have breath in my body, I will continue to do the work that God has called me to do. She and John Paul II share that one thing in common. We all watched John Paul II as his health declined. We watched him where now he couldn't barely walk. He had to move around in a conveyance that was either pushed or motorized. The man struggled to the bitter end, but he would not step down and he would not stop. Both Mother Teresa and John Paul II share one thing in common, and that's the idea that if they had stopped or slowed down, it would diminish the dignity of the elderly. Just because you're old doesn't mean you can't contribute. And you can continue to contribute until your dying breath, because God has given you the grace to be able to do that. It's a very, very powerful statement. It's a very profound statement. Because oftentimes you have a lot of the elderly that go, I'm old, I can't do anything anymore, I'm useless, I'm unwanted, I'm unneeded. Mother Teresa's best example of that is, old people can sit beside other old people who are dying. Because the person who is dying is not asking for a lot, they just want somebody to sit with them. If you take it into the scriptures, visit the dying, visit the sick, give a glass of water to somebody in need. Like, how hard is that to live the corporal works of mercy? Mother Teresa's entire life was surrounded by the corporal works of mercy. Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give shelter to the poor, visit the dying, bury the dead, visit those in prison. This is what she did, right to the very, very end. You sit on the floor beside the pallet, beside somebody who is dying, and you give them a glass of water. You wet their lips. How hard is that? You sit beside somebody who is dying, and you let them share their life story with you. How hard is that? All of us have the capability and that within us to be able to constantly be able to serve, even to the final days. Not all of us are going to be like John Paul II, writing letters the day before you die. Most of us are not going to do that. But all of us can sit beside somebody who's dying. All of us can give a glass of water to somebody in need. It's not that hard. Our problem is we're looking at the big things. I don't think I can put on a soup meal for 300 people. Nobody asked you to. But go over there and sit with those gentlemen and talk to them. Go sit with those battered women and talk to them. Make a cup of coffee for somebody who needs a cup of coffee. This was Mother Teresa's gift to all of us. And this is why, when she died, so many people came to see her, pay their respects, and acknowledge how she had changed the way we look at many, many things. She continues to do that today because many people have not caught on to her message. What does Jesus thirst for from us? Our love. What do we thirst for from Christ? His love. What fills us up? His love. What fills him up? The reciprocation of love. For he loved us first. Do I thirst for his love? Do I recognize the need in my life for the love of Christ? And do I pour it out? Some of you might remember those old clay jars with the spigot on the bottom, right? Big open mouth on the top, tiny little spigot on the bottom. Remember those jugs? Some of you might, okay? Ever kind of looked at it and thought about it from this point of view? The opening on the top is how God pours his love into us. And the spigot on the bottom is how we dribble it out to one another. You can never give it away as fast as God gives it to you. This was Mother Teresa's challenge to all of us, and it's a challenge to her sisters. God has filled you with love, share it. That spigot should never be turned off. It should be running full force all the time, because as much as you try to give it out, you will never give it away as fast as God is filling you up. That's our challenge. This is why, as one of the most influential women in the church today, she reminds us of this outpouring of love. They once asked her what her position was on married clergy. And her response was, "You cannot serve both God and mammon." Sorry. A priest has one bride, and that's Christ. They asked her what she thought of women clergy and women priests. And she says, "When we get done doing our work, then we'll consider doing theirs." Mother Teresa constantly pointed out that there was work that she and the sisters could do that no priest could do. Priest goes into the room, sits down beside the dying person. The dying person looks up at the priest, goes, "Oh my God, I'm dying." Sister goes in, sits down beside the dying person. The person looks up and goes, "Somebody came to visit." Totally different approach. The work that Mother Teresa's sisters do, as a priest, I can't do it. That's not what I'm called to. And Mother Teresa had a very, very good point. There are different roles in the church, and there are different needs in the church, and there are different purposes in the church. And they are not filled by both sexes. The reality is, the compassion of men is not the compassion of women. And the ability to deal with things as a woman, most men don't have. We are different. Mother Teresa's position on married clergy and female priests has always been one of the ones that I found very, very entertaining, because she was incredibly outspoken about it. But after they had interviewed her 2 or 3 times on this, nobody ever went to her again. Because when there's a little tiny woman putting you in your place and telling you, "Could you come up with a less stupid question?" Right? Let's get on to the important things, okay? Let's talk about feeding the hungry. Let's talk about clothing the naked. Let's talk about teaching these poor children on the streets who have no education. Let's talk about the important things. And when we get done with that, we'll get on to the less important things, like who cares about. That was Mother Teresa. There are the priorities, and let's get our priorities straight. The question is not about do we have enough priests and do we have enough sisters. The question is, are we trying to live holiness of life? Are we trying to live the Beatitudes? Are we trying to live the corporal works of mercy? Are we trying to live the spiritual works of mercy? Do we even know them, and can we name them? Oops. We can't name them, we don't know them, so how are we ever going to live them? Very powerful challenge that she laid down. And this is why she is blessed, and this is why one day she will be a saint among the saints. But this is why she is also one of those influential women, because she challenges us. And she's not comfortable just challenging us a little bit. She demands the most from us. She demands that we take it up another notch. That it's not good enough just to talk about things. It's like, what have you done? Have you washed that floor? Have you helped that person? Have you fed that person who is dying? Have you sat and talked with them? Did you give them a stinking glass of water? This is what she did for the world, and what she did for our church. The other thing that she did was from the ecumenical point of view. She didn't care if they were a Catholic who was dying, or a Hindu, or a Muslim. They were all God's children. And she recognized them as God's children, and nobody cared. They didn't have to show their Catholic ID to get into the hospice. They were dying, they were cared for. They were a leper, they were cared for. They were unwanted, in her house they were wanted. For us as Catholics, sometimes we forget that our Catholic world says we are all God's children. And we are all beautiful in the eyes of God, and we are all equal in the eyes of God, and we need to learn how to treat each other in that manner. From the ecumenical point of view, she had a very powerful message. Stop fighting. Love one another. If we take care of the poor, if we take care of the destitute, if we take care of those that nobody seems to want to take care of, how much better off will we be? If we start loving as Christ loved us, what do we have to fight over? If we love our neighbor as ourselves, what do we have to fight over? If we recognize Christ in each other, what do we have to fight over? We don't have anything to fight over except maybe the food on the table. And that's a different story. But we have to learn this mindset. As she laid out in state, the Hindus possessed by her, the Muslims possessed by her, the Christians possessed by her, the secularists possessed by her, the atheists possessed by her. She was able to speak to all of these people. They didn't all like what she had to say because she challenged them. How can you understand the care of the poor when you don't understand that there's something greater than you? We are not the most important thing in our own lives. Jesus Christ is. I live for Jesus. I love because he loved me first. I follow because he leads. I serve because he washed the feet of his disciples and he set me an example so that I might do what he did first. This is the challenge that Mother Teresa has laid out for the world. And even after her death, and even after this many years past her death, she continues to have this influence on the world. She continues to make a difference. The number of schools that are named after Mother Teresa, the number of universities that are named after Mother Teresa, institutions around the world named after Mother Teresa, because she sets an example and she sets a standard. And she invites us and she challenges us to live that moral type of life. Not because we're perfect, but because we're called to it. When she won her Nobel Peace Prize in 1979, it was for work undertaken in the struggle to overcome poverty and distress, which also constitutes a threat to peace. She refused the conventional ceremonial banquet given to laureates and asked that the $192,000 be given to the poor in India, stating that earthly rewards are important only if they helped her help the world's needy. Mother Teresa received the prize, $192,000 to the poor. Because you people are well fed and you don't need the money and I don't need the party. Do you know how distressful that was for the Nobel Peace Prize people? This isn't what you do. But she did. And the thing is, she did it in such a way that they couldn't even refuse. Because you gave me the Peace Prize for taking care of the poor, but you want to throw a fancy meal that's going to cost $192,000. But I'm all about taking care of the poor. So how can I come to this meal when the poor are starving? Can you imagine the Catholic guilt she laid on these people? You know? See, this is when we know that the whole world really is Catholic. Everybody succumbs to guilt. I looked at things like this and you know, she came out and made statements and took positions on things. Mother Teresa singled out abortion as the greatest destroyer of peace today. Because if a mother can kill her own child, what is left is for me to kill you and you to kill me. There is nothing between. In her work with the dying, we have all these people today who talk about the dignity of death and that I have to have a dignified death. And the thing is, if my death is going to look ugly or going to look difficult or might be painful, then let's shorten it. Here, put something in my arm, take my life, let it be done. Where's the dignity in that? And when does it stop? Because you know what? We got a whole bunch of people here on the streets of Lethbridge, in the streets of Calgary, that are homeless, destitute, starving, poor. Well, why don't we just go up to them and give them a choice? You know, you can continue to live like this on the streets, or we'll give you an injection and you're dead. And it's all over. You don't have to struggle anymore. You don't have to starve anymore. You don't have to be cold anymore. You can just be dead. It's okay. 1948, Mother Teresa figured it out. Our society is still trying to figure it out. We think that a lethal injection, just because the doctor told us what we have to take, is dignity. Dignity is not about the person. Dignity is about the people who serve the person. Death is death. Death is not ugly. Death is just death. The dignity of the person comes from you and I taking care of them. The dignity of the person comes from you and I recognizing the value of their life even in those moments before death. John Paul II, still writing letters the day before he dies. Mother Teresa still working the days before she dies. Why? Because there is dignity in work and there is dignity in life. The greatest dignity is that which you give to the other. Not about my personal dignity. Mother Teresa is a blessing to the church. She's a blessing to the world. She will probably never stop challenging us. The more stuff of Mother Teresa I read, the more I find enlightened by her, the more I find challenged by her, and probably the part that upsets me the most is the more inadequate I feel. John Paul II said this of Mother Teresa. Where did Mother Teresa find the strength and the perseverance to place herself completely at the service of others? She found it in prayer, in the silent contemplation of Jesus Christ, his face, his sacred heart. Privately, Mother Teresa experienced doubts and struggles over her religious beliefs, which lasted over 50 years until the end of her life, during which she felt no presence of God whatsoever, neither in her heart or in the Eucharist. But as put by her confessor, Mother Teresa expressed grave doubts about God's existence and pain over her lack of faith. Where is my faith, even deep down? There is nothing but emptiness and darkness. But if there be God, please forgive me. When I try to raise my thoughts to heaven, there is such convicting emptiness that those very thoughts return like sharp knives and hurt my very soul. How painful is this unknown pain? I have no faith. Repulsed, empty, no faith, no love, no zeal. What do I labor for? If there be no God, there be no soul. If there be no soul, then Jesus, you are also not true. With reference to Mother Teresa's words, he thought that many would misinterpret her meaning, but her faith that God was working through, she remained undiminished, and while she pined for the lost sentiment of closeness with God, she never questioned his existence. All of that struggle, all of that difficulty, all that pain. But the one thing that most people Don't follow on that, because most people stop right there. Mother Teresa's devotion to the Blessed Mother never faltered, never failed. Some say it's because of her early days with the Sisters of Loreto. That Irish influence. The Blessed Mother is deep in your soul. You can't get away from her. Many of us will experience those doubts, and many of us will experience the challenges. Many of us will struggle. But that's okay. It's more than that. St. John of the Cross in the 16th century coined the term the dark night of the soul. Many other saints had similar experiences of spiritual dryness, or what Catholics believe to be spiritual tests, passive purification. Such is Mother Teresa's namesake, St. Teresa of Lisieux, who called it a night of nothingness. Many look upon her doubts as typical, the signs of her sainthood, and the purpose of canonization. We can look at all of this stuff within Mother Teresa, her struggles, her fortitude, her conviction, her dryness. What makes her a saint is through the midst of all of this, she kept doing the work of God. She kept doing the work of a servant. She kept feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting the sick, burying the dead. Thank you very much for listening this evening.